Good evening and welcome back to the Too Deep NFL podcast. With you as always, Jeff Chadiha from the NFL Network, Eric Eager from Sumer Sports. I'm Soren Petro from Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City. Special edition of the Too Deep. We get an expert, real expert. We go to Doug Whaley, the Senior Vice President of Player Personnel for the XFL, former General Manager for the Buffalo Bills. We'll talk about some of the trades that happened here on the trade day. Can you tank in the NFL? Spending big money on mediocre quarterbacks. Why does it seem to happen? What's the future for the XFL? What's it like working with The Rock? I want to know that, for crying out loud. We'll also talk about the 49ers dropping their third straight. Brock Purdy, is everybody off the bandwagon? Are the Bengals back? Are the Cowboys, are they all fixed on offense? The Vikings losing Kirk Cousins. Is it time to believe in the New York Jets now that they're 4-3? And, of course, what we're looking for here in Week 9. It's all coming up right now on the Too Deep NFL podcast.
You're listening to the Too Deep Podcast, the most complete analysis of the National Football League, breaking down the NFL like no one else can. Too Deep is hosted by Jeff Chadiha, Eric Eager, and Soren Petro. Jeff Chadiha is a senior columnist and on-air personality for the NFL Network and NFL.com. Eric Eager is the Vice President of Research and Development for Sumer Sports. Soren Petro is the afternoon drive host of the program on Sports 810 WHB in Kansas City. Too Deep is proudly brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear since 1994. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, and every project comes with a written warranty. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, one contractor, all things parking lot. Now, here are the hosts of the Too Deep Football Podcast, Jeff Chadiha, Eric Eager, and Soren Petro.
And good evening. If you're joining us via the podcast, remember you can be a part of the conversation. We can see your comments in the chat room if you're with us. We record almost always Tuesday at 9 o'clock Central. So if you want to be a part of the conversation, make sure you join us there. We're on all the different platforms, Facebook, Twitch, YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn. You can be a part of the conversation. As we said, a special edition of the podcast as we welcome in a man who has been there on deadline day, a man who knows what it looks like when you have to go and decide, okay, we either are or are not going to do that. We welcome Doug Whaley, now with the XFL, formerly general manager for the Buffalo Bills. Doug, how are you, sir?
Fellas, it's a great day. I mean, we're ending up with at least some stuff to talk about midweek, but trade deadline is not as enthusiastic as baseball, basketball, and the other entities in the sports world, but we do have something interesting to talk about today.
Yeah, we do. And let's start there. Why is it that the NFL is less likely to move players, certainly player for players? We've seen a little bit more of it lately, but it's just not something that, NFL teams seem to want to do.
I think it comes down to just the nature of the sport. It's very hard for someone to come in mid-season and be able to really impact a club because you have to learn a system. And it's really a system that's dependent on how you fit with 10 other players. And to be able, and that's why they have all-season programs. That's why they have training camp. That's why you see a lot of players, especially skilled players, go and have practices by themselves. Quarterbacks have the receivers together. So you get that timing and that continuity. In other sports, you can kind of just throw someone in, a basketball, hockey, baseball. It's more of a flow thing, but it's really structured in the NFL and in football. So it's tough for someone to come in and, like I said, make a immediate impact in the game of football because of those reasons.
You know, Doug, I want to jump into the biggest trade of the day. Washington Commanders getting rid of Montez Sweat and Chase Young, a second overall pick 3-4 years ago. And one, they have new ownership there. You've been in a situation as a GM trying to figure out how to make moves. Like, what do you think goes into that kind of thinking? You're getting rid of two guys who were first-round picks who were supposed to be foundational players.
Not only two guys that were first-round picks and foundational players, but at a position that is a premium and very hard to find. and you have to be in a situation to either pay money or be not that good to be able to draft people of that caliber. So to be able to not be able to, but to trade them, it signifies to me, and I think it's going to signify to everybody in that organization, you can either call it a rebuild or a rebrand, but it's something. And it's not re-upping these guys to be the cornerstone of the Washington Commanders going forward. And to me, as a general manager and just looking at football in general, it's a passing league. And the way to stop that passing league is to have a pass rusher, and to have two proven pass rushers and to give them up. Then I think, like I said, it's signifying to the fan base that this new ownership's coming in and they want to go a different direction.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because they went and paid Deron Payne, Jonathan Allen, two kind of interior players, which I think the NFL is starting to kind of, with light boxes and stuff, see the importance of interior defensive linemen too. But it shows kind of the weird part of, like, when you invest that much in a D-line, at some point you have to make choices. And I agree with you. I think I probably would have chosen to keep the edge players as opposed to the interior players, just because it's such a hard athlete to find. Today, the Bills also traded for Rasul Douglas. This has been a team that has really struggled to keep corners healthy. And, with Tre'Davious White going out and Kahir Elam has not really, lived up to his draft billing. What do you think about, because, you were with the Bills before. What do you think about kind of this move for them as they try to go for another deep run in the AFC playoffs?
Well, first of all, like I said before, the NFL is a passing league. And then if you just look at their division right now, they're looking up at the Miami Dolphins. So they're thinking, how can we stop that potent offense? And then if you get past Miami, then you got to either go to Cincinnati or the Kansas City Chiefs. So corners are at a premium. And I think, like you said, though, it exposes not only how devastating the injury to Tre'Davious White was, but the miss on Kahir Elam. You're talking about a first-round pick that I think, if I'm right, was only active for 2 games this year. So that's going to put a real stress on that secondary. Now, Sean McDermott's a really effective defensive caller and a defensive coach, but when you're down 2 corners and you're expecting both of them to really be cornerstones, that puts a stress on everybody involved. So I give them kudos for not thinking they can make it with the players they have and going out and trying to supplement that position with Rasul Douglas.
When you look at some of the moves that are out there, like the Commanders move, I mean, is that a clear sign that they're rebuilding? Is this a team that's saying, it ain't gonna? I mean, listen, you trade your starting defense, man. I mean, you couldn't make more of a statement that you're waving the white flag. And is that because they looked at them and said, we're not going to pay you what the going rate is, right? Like, what it's going to take to pay these guys is just going to make our cap worse, and we're not good enough with them right now. I mean, is this the closest thing towards, beginning a half a year early on what will be a complete reshuffling of the deck with Washington?
I think so, and I think when you get to the end of it, I'll give credit to – now we'll see how this unfolds, and it's going to be some time, but this may mark the instance where the Commanders as an organization, as a franchise, made that commitment to say, we didn't get to where we needed to go with these guys. We need to find a quarterback that's going to get us to where we need to go, and that's not only the playoffs, to the championship. And it's proven that to them that if you don't have a quarterback, you can have the greatest D-line in the world, but it's not going to get you anywhere. So I give credit to the ownership and whoever's leading and making that call to say, why am I going to spend all this money, cap space, when I can free up some cap space, get some draft capital, and try to make a move to go get that signal caller that we think can take us to where we need to go.
And Doug, we got a little static that's popped up on your mic. I wonder if we could get you maybe to drop out and then jump back on and see if we can get a little clearer, because I want to make sure we don't have too much popping. So just out and then hit that same link and come back in, and we'll get you right back in.
All right, sounds good.
Yeah, because we get a little bit of popping there with Doug's mic. We want to try to clear that up real quick. But, I mean, I do think when you look at what the Commanders have done, that this is a team that said reboot. And if you're the coach.
Yeah. I got into a lot of shit 2 weeks ago for saying on air that I thought Sam Howell was a career backup. I feel like, is Sam Howell not the clearest case of here's a quarterback that's good enough to start 17 games and not be a complete disaster, but is not long term? Like, are we like this Washington team was like very clearly a bridge to next year, right?
I mean, I think everybody would like. I mean, is Brock Purdy a bridge now? Then, like, right? That's the question. If Sam Howell's a bridge because he's a 5th rounder, then Brock Purdy's just a bridge because he's a 7th rounder. Like, what, Doug? We were talking about the quarterback spot, and I know that's one of the things we wanted to talk about with you. You know, it's very early. It's not time to pay Brock Purdy or Sam Howell. You know, they're still working through it, but that is kind of the magic riddle, right? When you have a quarterback that's better than what most guys are out there, but it's going to cost you too much. I spent a lot of time here in Kansas City saying, look, I get it. Alex Smith is good. Back then, I think he was making $17 million when the top quarterback was making like 21. And I said, I don't think you can use up that much of your cap on a guy who's just good and not great. When you're in that GM seat, though, the fear of the unknown seems to drive more of the payment of quarterbacks than maybe what the quarterback's actual ability is, doesn't it?
And it's really, I call it quarterback purgatory. And I said that when I was the GM of the Bills and people lambasted me. But the point being is you have a roster or a quarterback that's good enough to keep you competitive, but not good enough to get you a championship. And then you get in coaches and they're competitive. They're saying, well, I don't want to go with the unknown. I want to go with the known. At least we're going to be in a conversation. And then if the ball bounces right, or we build enough people around them, put enough people around them, we can elevate his game to take us to the championship level. And it's very hard to do. And that's a hard way to make a living because the room for error is very slim when you don't have that bona fide signal caller. But again, it's one of those things. What are you going to do? You're not going to pay a Daniel Jones or an Alex Smith because those guys will keep you in that conversation. And that's hard to go into an owner and into a head coach saying, hey, listen, we're going to take our lumps for a year or two, but we need to find a signal caller if the ultimate goal is to win a championship. They're going to say, no, because I need to sell tickets. If we get in the first round of playoffs as the owner, that's cash to me. As a head coach, he's going to say, I may not have the time. You say all of this, I lose 2 years in a row before we get that quarterback, or we get a quarterback and before he's proven to be that guy, I'm gone. So the lack of time and patience really benefits these mediocre quarterbacks, and that's why they're getting paid.
Yeah, it's so funny because, like, you know, back in I think about the 90s, right? If you didn't have, you know, Aikman, Young, Jim Kelly, Marino, like the top, you know, let's say 8 guys, a lot of these teams, like I think of like Detroit, it was like Eric Kramer, Andre Ware, Rodney Peete. It was like they'd shuffle, right? And I think the salary cap has really hurt that because it's like they used to pay all those quarterbacks like a decent amount of money relative to everybody else. And it's like nowadays you have to your point, you have to choose one. And there's like a hubris associated with it. Do you ever see Doug, a time when teams do go back to, okay, we don't have a great quarterback, but let's not even platoon, but like, let's just go back and forth between 2 guys and kind of have them compete throughout the year? Because it doesn't even seem like even teams like Washington, who has a really capable backup in Brissett, has even thought about going to him when Howell has struggled.
I think the only way you will see that is if you have commitment and buy-in from the ultimate top, and that's ownership. Ownership, the GM, the president, because the business side is going to suffer, and the head coach have to have all buy-in on this, but more importantly, have a plan to find that person, be it 2 platoon or, hey, listen, we're going to take our lumps, and there's going to be this draft year. There's supposedly maybe 5 or 6 possible first-round quarterbacks. So if I was going to do that, I would be taking those lumps this year, maybe what's Washington doing, so you can be in a position to get one of those top 6 quarterbacks. And you want to do it in a year where there's multiple options. You don't want to do it in a year where there's only 1 or 2, because then you have to give up too much draft capital or tank or be bad enough to have that first or second pick. So again, I don't think that's going to happen. Now, what I think may happen before that is a team saying, oh, we have a quarterback that's Daniel Jones-esque, took us to the playoffs, but that's not going to preclude us from drafting a quarterback in the first round and have those guys compete. And if Daniel Jones wins it, then his level of play must have exceeded the young guys. And if the young guy shows enough and Daniel Jones ends up being that guy that you want, then you have a trade commodity. You have a commodity that you can maybe get as long as he performs admirably in the preseason or when he gets his time, then you can maybe trade that guy for more than what you spend on him.
Well, that's such a great point, because back in the day, like the Bears drafted Jim Harbaugh when Jim McMahon was their quarterback. The Broncos drafted Tommy Maddox when John Elway was the quarterback, and first round guys, right? Jim Juckenmiller when Steve Young was there. And back then you had, all the way back in the day, 6 preseason games, at least 4 back then. Now you have the 3. I think teams are like, well, you're never going to get to see that guy. But look around the league. There's so many injured quarterbacks right now that you are going to see that backup guy probably in all likelihood. And it's often even a case, in my opinion, to draft 2 quarterbacks relatively high, because you are going to get an opportunity to see both. For example, in Indianapolis, if they would have drafted another guy, he'd be playing right now instead of Gardner Minshew when Richardson's hurt. So it's an interesting discussion topic.
No doubt. And I think another thing that will benefit that thought process is as many teams that are doing joint practices now. So a lot of teams are doing 2 to 3 joint practices with other teams. So that's how, from a personnel standpoint, I love those. So I can get intimate details on all those guys that are roster bubble guys or their backups that are better than our starters. So that's another avenue that those quarterbacks could get exposed.
Doug, you used that word tank in your last answer. I know Soren loves the idea of teams tanking in the NFL to get better. How realistic is it for a team to tank, to truly do what the 76ers did in the NBA for years? Is that an option?
I hate to say it's a tank, but I'll say this. There are moves you can make, especially from the general manager and head coaching position, to put a lesser quality of player on the field. Now, in the player's mind, that's not a tank, because every player is saying, I have to pay my rent every day. I have to go out there and compete and put quality tape out there, not only for the team I'm playing, but maybe another team that may be interested. So they're going to go out and compete. And these guys are professionals, some obviously better than others. But when you get to that level, they still have some type of ability. And we see it. The NFL is a week-to-week league. So at any time, because of their competitive nature, a team that is not as quality as another team could still reach out and bite a team and win. So is there tanking I wouldn't use it tanking, but there are some strategic decisions to make sure that they don't have the best product out there to fulfill trying to win every game.
I don't understand why people, like maybe it's like, people freaking out over the term global warming. If they called it global climate change, then we wouldn't have everyone every time there's a cool day in June go, oh, where's global warming, right? Like maybe it's that kind of thing. If we just call it asset reallocation and instead of tanking, then it wouldn't carry this negative term. I mean, I get that you're not going to tell your quarterback to go throw interceptions, right? But to your point, you can play the young guys. You can trade away your starting defensive ends at the trade deadline for resources and play guys that aren't as good. They're still the best that you got. You can try to coach. I mean, I know it gets hard when they look around and go, well, wait a minute, we just gave away 4 of our best players. But you're really going to find something out about the guys that are left if they're out there. And I just think, you tell me, having sat in that seat, had the pressure of getting the quarterback's so freaking important that, and they're so impatient with those general manager jobs. Like, and you only get, I always say, like, first year guys, you got to embrace that first year, man, because you get 1 year that it's not your fault. It's the last coach, it's the last GM, it's everybody else. But year 2, it's your fault. And year 3, it's not just your fault. The last 20 years are your fault.
Yeah.
I mean, I take calls from people, and they call in, and when a team's bad, Andy Reid in 2015 had gone 9-7 in 14, missed the playoffs, and started 1-5. And people were calling in telling me, I've had season tickets for 40 years. I've never seen a Super Bowl. I mean, they wanted Andy's ass run out of town because and suddenly he was responsible for the last 40 years,
Yes.
right? So, like, why not go all in and do those things, whatever you can do to minimize the victories and try to put yourself to get the best cap. And then after that, I get it. You got to be all in on every win. But that first year, that's your one grace period, isn't it?
No doubt about it. But again, I said this earlier, that's where you have to make sure everybody is on the same page. You got to make sure the owner's okay with that. You're okay with the coach and even the business side, because that affects sponsorship dollars, that affects marketing, that affects ticket sales, that affects, are you going to get primetime games? We're obviously going to not get playoff money coming in. So as long as you have that buy-in from everybody, then you can go full force ahead with that plan. But there's not too many organizations that everybody's going to say, okay, let's do this, knowing that there's that saying, you got to sometimes take a step back to take a step forward. It's just hard in today's sports entertainment world, because you're going to have the media, the fans, and everybody just drilling you. You guys think you don't know what you're doing, blah, blah, blah. But you can also not go out and say, hey, we're going to do what we can to find a franchise quarterback. And if that means playing these guys and finding out about them, and we don't win a lot, in the end, though, we are going to win, because we're going to be in a position to get us a quarterback that can take us to holding up trophies.
I wanted to get you, because you were the GM for the Bills at a time when the NFL was going from still valuing running backs to a certain degree. I think guys like, I think the Seahawks won the championship, right, with Marshawn Lynch, your first year as a GM, to now guys like Saquon Barkley can't get paid. Derrick Henry is on the trade block. Josh Jacobs. I mean, obviously, some of those guys were talked about as being traded around the deadline today. Where do you stand on the value of running backs, and will that ever go back in a positive direction for them?
Well, where I stand is, let's just take a look. Take a look at Pee Wee football. Take a look at high school football. What do? Everybody's in a shotgun and they throw it, spread. They have 7-on-7 leagues now. And 7-on-7, you don't run the ball. So this game is trending toward a passing game. Look at the rules of how they are set up in favor of the offense, because people like scoring. Scoring brings eyeballs. Eyeballs brings money. So it's not the devalue of the running back. It's the switch in the value of the game, because it's not sport anymore. It's entertainment. And a more entertaining game means more eyeballs, more selling of whatever, of all that stuff, sponsorship. So to me, in the end, it comes down to what this game has morphed into, and it's a passing league. I will say that. But when you look at it, though, that it's a league where you pass to score points, but the really good teams know in the end you have to run to win games. So they'll pass to get those points up, but to ice the game, you got to have a running back. But that devalues how much you need to invest in that running back position. Another thing that's hurting the running backs are guys. I'm in Pittsburgh. Jalen Warren's coming in as undrafted free agent that is performing as well as Najee Harris, was the first-round pick. So there's that argument. Like, we can get somebody like that, because when it's a passing league, the pass sets up the run. So you don't need to have that skilled of a running back to be able to get yardage. So I think it's just a total ecosystem of where football is now and where it's heading, I think. Will it ever go back to 3 yards in a cloud of dust? I would say if it does, I don't think it's going to be anytime soon.
Well, Doug, and do you think that the last point you made, whereas like, there's obviously variance at other positions. You have, guys like, Marcus Colston, round 7. You have other guys who are undrafted, but running back seems to be that position where either there's such a huge glut of talent where there's not a ton of like variance and, round set, like they're the most talented players on their team forever. And so there's just a bunch of them. Or do you think that we're truly bad as an NFL intelligentsia at actually evaluating the position, like which one? Because I feel like that's a big part of it, right? Is that position, A, it's so dependent on other things to do well, and B, are we just bad at evaluating it?
I think it's a combination. I think when you look at evaluation, and I'll take Najee Harris just because I'm familiar with him. When he was at Alabama, he had holes he could go through, and those holes didn't close up as quickly as they did in the NFL, because even though the SEC is the closest to the NFL, that on a team like Missouri, they may only have one or two NFL players on their roster. But when he gets to the NFL, that hole, if he doesn't have that burst to get through, that hole's going to close real quick. And instead of getting that 7 to 8 yards he did in Alabama and maybe 15, he's going to get 2 to 3. So that's part of it. But in the end, I think it comes down to it's just the basis of what football is all about right now. And it's get people in space, get athletes in space. And that's why if you're going to be a running back, I would sit there and tell people to look at Christian McCaffrey. Those are the type of future running backs, guys that are multi-dimensional, can run inside, can run outside, can split out and be a receiver. You have to be that, similar to the new hybrid tight end, the H-back. That's what running backs have to think of themselves now is, I need to be a hybrid running back that can do everything.
Doug, last question here. I wanted to ask you about your role with the XFL. You're the executive VP of player personnel. And we've talked about this at Pro Days about what the XFL can be. What's your vision about how the XFL can grow and also help players who might want to get into the NFL?
Yeah, the way we look at it is we want to be a part of the football ecosystem, and we want to be a part where we can give players, coaches, evaluators, trainers, performance coaches, either a springboard onto what they want to be and attain, may it's the NFL, or a soft landing, meaning, hey, I am part of a professional league and doing what I love and being in the football ecosystem and making the football ecosystem a little better, because the more players you have that can really gain that experience and increase their level of productivity, the coaches that can get better at coaching, that's going to raise the level of play up across the whole football ecosystem, which is going to make this game greater, better, and more eyeballs in, so more people get involved in it and truly, in my opinion, get a taste of what it is to be a professional in a game that they love.
I think it's been, so just briefly, I worked with Bruce Gradkowski at PFF, and I know he had really struggled to find a place where he could call plays with professional players. And I know I really enjoyed watching he and Anthony's games with the Battlehawks this year. I think that point is like getting repetitions in those situations where there's only 32 guys calling plays in the NFL. I think that's incredibly valuable to sort of get to get people confidence and to get people, and it's just more jobs in football, I think is also an incredibly valuable thing. And I just want to commend you for that, because I do think just as his friend and some, I've really enjoyed him getting the opportunity to develop in a league in the spring and get to showcase his skills. So it's cool in my opinion.
No doubt about it. And we have to give credit to Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson and Redbird Capital with Jerry Cardinale and Danny Garcia. Our ownership group has been great, and it's all about just the league of opportunity. And that is, and I talk to people about, when you're a GM, there's no greater feeling than to be able to grant someone an opportunity to live out their dream, being drafting them, signing them as a free agent, or rewarding them with a contract. And now we are actually giving people that may have slipped through the cracks for whatever circumstance a chance to live out their dream. So this opportunity that we're available to afford these guys, it's a really good feeling, and just excited that we have ownership that's committed to that.
Well, don't get me started, because I think every NFL team should have a minor league. I don't understand why we don't have quarterbacks playing. I think that's one of the most obvious things. But to Eric's point about play calling and coaching, might I add refereeing and getting better as refs. I'll throw in one of my pet peeves on that one. It's desperately needed. There's no doubt about it. Doug, hey, thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. Very informative, very enlightening. Thanks so much. Hopefully we'll get a chance to talk to you on down the road.
Fellas,
Thank
enjoyed
you
it.
so much.
Enjoy the rest of the year, and we'll talk soon.
Sounds
All right,
good.
man.
Sounds good. Doug Whaley joining us here on the 2 Deep podcast. He is the Executive Vice President of Player Personnel for the XFL, former GM for the Buffalo Bills. Jeff, what jumped at you the most from what he was talking about?
Just really, just the honesty for one. I think just talking about the tanking part of it, we always go back and forth about that. And just, he kind of gave you a little more credence that there is a route to make that happen in the NFL as far as, putting lesser players on the field. But, he's one of those guys who I've known him for a long time. And I've always valued his opinion and his beliefs and he's just very a straight shooter. And so I think that's what we got from the interview. I think he was very candid about the job in the league.
Eric, what was the biggest thing that jumped out at you?
Yeah, the honesty was big. I think that a lot of times former NFL, because think about this, like there are not many GMs that get a second chance. Like right now in the NFL, it's like Martin Mayhew.
I'm so glad you brought that up because you've mentioned that, and if we'd had more time, we didn't. I didn't want to keep him too late, but I totally want to hear. Like he kept talking about patience from the team, and that's just it. Like you gotta like do so much in 1 year, and if you don't get it done, you're
but
out.
In the NFL, it's weird because the coaches have a shorter leash in their job length. The individual job lengths. The coaches have a shorter leash, but executives have a little bit longer of a leash, but then they don't get a second job. Like my boss, Thomas Dimitroff, like he's gotten one interview. He was a 12-year NFL GM with a really like a 60% winning percentage, right? And Rick Spielman's the same thing. And like right now in the league, there are two guys, Trent Baalke and Mark Mayhew. And I'm reading the team, like Mark Mayhew's not going to be there anymore after this redo, and Mark Mayhew, was an executive, I think, for the Lions and now the Commanders, and Baalke was obviously San Francisco and Jacksonville, but it doesn't happen very often. And I think what's interesting is even people even Thomas is a little bit guarded about some stuff because there's always the allure of going, but I don't want to say something that gets me. It was kind of, and Thomas has opened up quite a bit, which is refreshing. I found Doug incredibly refreshing. He's kind of like, look, like this is how it is. And, if no one ever wants to hire me again for a GM job, whatever. But I found him to be very honest and insightful.
Yeah, I did too. Love talking to him and his honesty, his like Jeff said, the blunt and direct nature with which he's a straight shooter. And that's great to hear. I mean, on everything. And the running backs, I mean, he hit upon it. You better look like Christian McCaffrey, right? You better be able to do it all. Wow. If you're going to play that position and you want to make any money, it's just where it's going. So, I really appreciate it. Doug Whaley joining us there on the 2D podcast. We got a number of other topics we want to get to here tonight. Jeff, let's start with the 49ers. First of all, let's start with the fact that we're proudly brought to you by our friends at Gann Asphalt and Concrete, serving the greater KC area, nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor. Parking lot problems, they've been making them disappear since 1994. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com. Third straight loss for the 49ers. Just a tough stretch, or shine coming off Brock Purdy. Reality is they've now watched some tape on him and they know what the weaknesses are.
I think the weakness is that when the team is not playing well around him, he can't lift them up. And so that's, he's still doing the same things. The problem is now at the end of games or when they fall behind, he's having to do things he's not comfortable doing. And he'll admit that. I mean, he's talked about forcing the football too much and not playing within the offense and trying to find ways to create plays that aren't there. He had a horrible play against the Bengals where he missed a handoff and tried to roll out. And now he's trying to decide if I throw the ball, I got a lineman down the field. He puts the ball in the air. All of a sudden, Pratt has it for the Bengals. It's going the other way. And so they have to get back to doing what they do well, which is playing good defense. They haven't run the football very well. They haven't tackled very well. They miss Deebo Samuel. They miss Trent Williams. And that's exposing his weaknesses. And that's a better way to look at it is to say that he's not – nobody ever thought he was Patrick Mahomes, but he's clearly made it clear he's never going to be that kind of quarterback the way the last three games have gone.
Yeah. Yeah. Where do you think the level of concern should be for the 49ers, Eric?
I think they're still a top 3 or 4 team in the NFC, which means a little bit more now that we know Detroit's fairly good. Dallas has come back from their falls a little bit, and Philadelphia is a real team. I mean, the interesting part for me is the Cleveland game was terrible, right? 12 of 27, 125, an interception, his first interception in the NFL, 4.6 yards per pass attempt. The last 2 weeks is kind of interesting because he's actually like, take away the turnovers, which you can't do, 70% completion, 9.1 yards per pass attempt against the Vikings, 71% completion percentage, 11.8 yards per pass attempt. He threw for 365 yards against Cincinnati. The turnovers, though. And this is why, this is why when people say turnover-worthy plays, or they bring up stats that people get angry about, and they're like, well, I don't give a crap if he's not about interceptable passes. I only care about the ones that are intercepted. It's like, well, if you spend your whole career throwing balls to the free safety's chest and he drops them, and then they start catching them, right? Brock Purdy has mostly been the same player he's always been. To Jeff's point, to win, for the 49ers to win, they have never won a game under Kyle Shanahan trailing by more than 1 score in the fourth quarter. That is not in their DNA. It is not, and that is why, folks, they went out and got Trey Lance, because Patrick Mahomes in the fourth quarter of that Super Bowl showed Kyle Shanahan exactly the kind of quarterback that he's missing. Now he's back with another quarterback that can't come from behind, but my whole thing is the Niners are who the Niners are. They just have gotten kind of unlucky in the last couple of games, and so what we've seen is that team that beat Dallas by 30 points or whatever. It's not as good as that is. And it's not, and I would contend it's not as bad as a team that loses by 14 at home to the Bengals.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And listen, the 49ers aren't healthy. Deebo Samuel's hurt again. Trent Williams is hurt again. And, it's not a freak accident when it happens all the time. Trent Williams is just getting older. And guys get rolled up on when they're young. They hop around, kind of run it off. When you get older, you don't just run it off, right? And so that's the problem, is they've got the quarterback that's cheap enough to allow all these expensive guys, but a lot of George Kittle's the same way. They're expensive guys that, you almost got to roll the dice and get them all to the postseason healthy, because otherwise they're not the same team. I mean,
how many defensive linemen do they need, though?
Well,
Lord. God, how much money they put in their defensive line? They keep going, getting more guys.
I know. And listen, they said, I heard, I don't know where it was, that is Kyle Shanahan's MO. That's what he wants. That's the first thing they wanted to build, a great defensive line. And that's awesome. But and I think there's a little bit, maybe this was Andy Reid early on in his career. Kyle Shanahan, has been heralded, and rightfully so, as a great play caller and great play designer. And you start to believe your own BS. Like I can just scheme with anybody, right? Maybe not quite anybody, because they did pay Deebo Samuel and they did pay Trent Williams, but you start to believe it because Andy Reid, 9 of his first 14 picks. I don't know if they were, I think 12 of them were first, 2 of them were seconds because he had traded his first. 14 picks for Andy Reid, 9 of them defensive linemen. Like, would he have won a Super Bowl in Philadelphia if he put a couple of more weapons around Donovan McNabb? He always was wanting to make sure that Jim Johnson had his, and just I'll scheme it up over here. Kyle Shanahan seems to be following the Andy Reid Eagle blueprint right now in San Francisco, and that never did win a championship.
I mean, literally, they've got 7 first-round picks, and when you go out and you get Chase Young, and you trade for Randy Gregory, and you've already paid Nick Bosa a huge amount of money. You've already paid Javon Kinlaw, draft first-round pick on him, Eric Armstead, the kid they got, Javon Hargraves. I mean, it's just they are so – that's the thing that worries me about the Niners right now, is that they're making so many moves almost out of desperation in areas where, if you really trust what you got, you don't have to do all this stuff to win a championship. I mean, I think that there's more happening there, and I think they're really concerned about where their defense is going right now. I thought that, Steve Wilkes would go in there and he would pick right up where DeMeco Ryans left off at, and it's not the same defense right now.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. It's like DeMeco Ryans basically just picked up right where Salah left off, and that transition has not been the same this year, which is troubling. I think also the Niners they're kind of the anti-Chiefs, right? We talk about the Chiefs on our other podcast, the Best Chiefs podcast, but like they're the opposite, right? We're all talking about all these like peripheral parts that don't matter that in the grand scheme of things because the quarterback and the coach are the strong links of the thing. Whereas why do the Niners, since 2011, the Niners have either made the NFC Championship game or better, or lost 10 or more games in every season but one, 2014. And the reason for that is that entire time, they've been a team that is full of fulcrums on the roster that aren't the quarterback. George Kittle gets hurt a lot, right? The Trent Williams, right? The running back. McCaffrey has not been McCaffrey hurt his oblique against the Browns. He hasn't run well in 2 weeks, right? That's been an issue. Debo, right, is the thing that everybody forgets when they're like, oh my God, this guy can play every position. This is amazing. Is eventually your team evolves into needing him to play every position. So when he gets hurt, you're bleeped, right? Like, so I think that's the part of the Niners thing that is a leak, is that they need kind of too many parts to be good, whereas the quarterback dominant teams need the quarterback and the coach to be good, right? And so when that fails, it's more catastrophic. But when the Niners have like one or two issues, it falls off the table pretty quickly as well.
By the way, I will reference this. Lucas says, if I recall, Soren was on the whole bring Williams to Casey thing before he re-signed with the Niners. I was adamant that they should be trading for him because Eric Fisher.
The Niners the Chiefs were interested in Trent Williams too. Like, let's not.
They were, but they weren't interested in trading for him, and that was the time to get him. And if they traded for him, they might not have been battling San Francisco to sign him. It became clear San Francisco was going to spend whatever it took to re-sign him. But at the time, the Chiefs, when it came up, I asked some people, and I said, sorry, Trent Williams is available. It's one of the best left tackles in football. I said, are you interested? They said, no, we like our tackles. They're cost effective. We like some of our young guys. None of those young guys are here, and none of the tackles are here. And the tackles weren't there just a year later. So when you get a chance to get Trent Williams, you get him. Now, if you got to pay him $25 million a year into his mid-30s, that gets a little bit tougher. And listen, I do think it's been a little bit of bad luck with Trent Williams because he is still elite, playing at a high level, but you can't deny he's been banged up pretty much every year since he signed that big contract. And that's the scary part. But to trade for him, what did the Niners give up a third-round pick?
Third-round pick, yeah. But he was coming off of a cancer thing. And, I mean, you really had to dig into it and be like, his issues were more the Washington Commanders being inept than it was his cancer scare, right? Like that's what you had to dig into. And, frankly, like, not to bring this back full circle, but to the Niners and the Commanders again, everybody's like, well, why did Washington only get a third for Chase Young and a second for Montez Sweat? Like, there are teams in the league that are like, we don't know if Chase Young's knee is going to hold up. Like, this is a real question. So I think that this is like a legitimate rental for the Niners and not like a long-term thing.
Let me also say that is a second from the Bears, right? Which could be 33.
Yeah, it's the Chase Claypool thing.
And it's a third from the Niners, which could be 96.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, there's a big disparity. It ain't just, it's just a few picks apart. Yeah. This could be like 62 picks apart, 63 picks apart before it's all said and done. Jeff, are the Bengals back? Is that what that registers, or no? Is it more about the Niners just have problems?
Yeah. Oh yeah. But if you watched that game and you saw the way Joe Burrow moved around, you saw the way Joe Mixon ran the football, which is really half the story. I mean, their defense is coming alive, and we all knew when they lost Jesse Bates and Von Bell that was a big loss for them. But they are way more athletic. They are far more faster than they were before, and their D line is playing lights out. I mean, Hendrickson is going crazy. Hubbard has played well. DJ Reader, they've got the right mix, and now you're seeing them starting to hit their stride. For my money, if they weren't 4-3 right now, they would be talked about as being the best team in the AFC. If they were where the Chiefs were right now, they might be the best team in the NFL. I mean, as far as record. So yeah, I totally think that to go in there, get a double-digit victory, coming off a bye, and knowing you've got control of your own destiny moving forward. All the teams that you need to beat to get to a pretty good seed in the playoffs are in front of you, and to win the division. I think that they look pretty scary right now.
Yeah, no doubt. Eric, are you back on the Bengals bandwagon?
I am, and it's annoying. I hate that they're good, but they are good. Mixon was running great. It's so funny to me that last season the elixir was getting Joe Burrow out of playing under center and into the shotgun and distributing that way, right? That was the catalyst for them being good on offense and like not taking the air out of the ball with Joe Mixon. And like the exact opposite is what has gotten them back on track this year, which is Burrow having enough mobility to be under center for them to do the long stretch stuff and for them to actually run the football. Mixon has been horrendous this year until like just the last 2 or 3 weeks. And it's all come with them kind of getting back to a traditional running game and getting under center and moving the ball that way.
Yeah. Listen, it sucks watching them be good because
their fan, the 10% of their fan base that's vocal on Twitter, there is not a worse subsection of humans in the world.
Stop reading every tweet that comes down the line, first of all. But
doesn't live there anymore.
Yeah. Second of all, I think they do with the Broncos. I think the Broncos are playing Bengals defense, and the Bengals, play it better, and their quarterback's way better. They can hang points, and so I think Cincinnati, and listen, this is kind of becoming their MO, isn't it, Jeff? That they just kind of sputter early. We can put it all at the injuries. There's a lot of talk on the about the calf injury. Tommy's saying, well, come on, as a calf, it wasn't an ACL, but they sputtered last year early as well, and then once they got rolling, they were rolling, right? I mean, they've been really dangerous coming down the stretch for several years now.
Yeah, and I think there is some truth to the theory that Burrow not playing in the preseason for whatever reason, injuries, I think all injuries the last few years, slows them down out of the gate. But I also think that there's an element. They have a lot of the same things that happened with the Chiefs when they get out of sorts, where they want to be spectacular, make all these big plays and be super explosive, and sometimes they won't take what defenses give them. And so now, as Eric said, you're seeing them, let's run Joe Mixon more. Like, let's get more guys involved. This kid from Princeton who's catching touchdown passes now. I can't pronounce the Greek guy, whatever his name is, Iovis or something like that.
Yeah.
Is that how you say it, Eric?
Iokovos?
Is that how you say it? Okay, there you go.
I think so.
Yeah.
He don't know.
Did you just sneeze? But they've got to figure it out as they go. But once they figure it out, they get it going pretty good.
Yeah, they're pretty damn good. How about the Cowboys? Who's in on the Cowboys being fixed? Eric, are you buying the Cowboys being, getting up to the elite level with the NFC?
I tweeted this out on Sunday. The Cowboys rediscovering who CeeDee Lamb was like one of those videos of an infant putting on glasses for the first time, being able to see, right? Like when they finally see their parents' face and they're like, they giggle and all this kind of stuff. I like Mike McCarthy. I really do. I was one of the people that he famously went and met with at PFF. I think he's a nice guy. I think he gets too much crap. But my God, they finally figured out to throw the ball to their best player 15 times in a game, and it finally worked. Oh, funny. Like that. The one thing that I'm tripped out about was, and this is another, remember this, people, when all of us, including me, were like, let Russ cook. And then Pete Carroll trades him to the Denver Broncos, and we all see what the stew looks like, right? Everybody's like, well, we need Pollard over Zeke, right? Maybe Dallas knows a thing or two about what giving Pollard 20 carries would do to his body, because that guy stinks now. Like, that's the one part of this team that I'm worried about, because the O-line's a little shaky, and if Tony Pollard ever goes missing, I'm looking 2.6 yards in front of the center, because that's where he's going to be. That's the one part about this team. I'm all in everywhere else. Defense is great. They missed Diggs, but it's fine. They got a great pass rush, good scheme with Dan Quinn. They can't, like, Tony Pollard, what the hell happened to him?
No, it's a great point. It's a great point about CeeDee Lamb. And there is, For a guy that talented, who's your best receiver by far, to have to complain about targets, and he's been on fire the last couple of weeks just because they're throwing the football. Not only they're scheming him,
and he can win from anywhere. He wins outside, he wins in the slot, and like there's not a game plan against CeeDee Lamb, and yet you're like, oh, let's throw the ball 8 times to Michael Gallup. What are we doing? Like I watch their games because I have, fantasy. I'm watching the games because I have a ton of CeeDee Lamb in fantasy. And I'm like, you just threw the ball 9 times to Michael Gallup tonight.
Yeah. Yeah. And their red zone problems went away amazingly. With Lamb in the
because they
red zone.
didn't throw us like they what's wrong with Dallas Cowboys red zone offense? Well, every pass is a swing pass to Tony Pollard outside the numbers where he has no shot. Like that's what the problem is with your,
Yeah. Yeah, no doubt. Listen, there's something to be said. I mean, Tommy said he became a full-time running back.
Yeah.
Change of pace.
Right.
I mean, there's a difference there. They kind of need that good complimentary back. By the way, why risk accidents and liability in your parking lot? I'll get your parking lot restriped today with Gann Asphalt and Concrete, a brightly striped lot. We'll cut down on accidents, keep your parking lot as safe as possible, take away any liability or problems, take away the things that take you away from your business. Focus on what matters. Let GannAsphalt.com or let Gann Asphalt and Concrete focus on your parking lot. You can find them at GannAsphalt.com. Let's talk a little bit about the Vikings and Kirk Cousins going down. Is there a moral to this story? Is it that they should have recognized that they weren't going anywhere anyway and gotten something for him when they could? That's the moral for me, Jeff.
Yeah, I mean, it's, talking to the people over there, they were never going to consider trading him. That was never an option. But it's just a sad story for one. I mean, it's a guy who really was playing his best football. That team was turning the corner. We saw it. I think they turned the corner against the Chiefs. That's when they started to playing better, was after that game. And all of a sudden he goes down. It gets a little bit tricky. And I'm kind of curious now to see if he ends up back there, because I don't know what his market's going to be like with that Achilles. And maybe it's a lot more preferable for him to return to that team as opposed to go out there and take less money and not be certain about what his opportunities are. So that is a possibility. But, man, I felt bad for the guy sitting there. I think as much crap as he takes, he seems like a guy who wants to do the right things. There was that shot of him on the card coming off where he was clapping for the offense. It was after his head was down. They had a big play or something. But yeah, as far as getting rid of him, they probably should have made the move. I agree with you on that one. But, again, I think it's just heartbreaking for him.
Yeah, I think so as well. Eric, what's your takeaway?
Yeah, I mean, the Kirk Cousins thing is very complicated because I think he came to Minnesota with a coach that didn't believe him, didn't want him. And I think both men came off as, I just work here guys at the end, which I think was not endearing to him. The last 2 years, I think Kevin O'Connell has been brilliant in how he's empowered Kirk Cousins to be the best version of himself. And even to the point where Kirk is throwing more interceptions because he's taking more chances. He's doing a lot. And he's become a better teammate. Like, I think when you ask around the league, you're like, well, what's the deal with Kirk Cousins? Most of my friends in the league are like, well, he's a bad, not a bad teammate, but he's like, he's just a work here guy, right? He just works here. He's not the quarterback. He's not Patrick. And I think when you watch the documentary, there is a huge gap. But Kirk has like grown on me in the fact, in all those other reasons, the being friends with his teammates, being part of the, being that like leadership guy. And I do think it's sad. I thought he was playing tremendous football. The fact that they're 3-0 without Justin Jefferson is a huge punt. Like, Jefferson's a top 5 player in the league, and he has really, the Bears game was kind of a privilege, but for the last 2 games, like, he was very good offensively. So it'll be interesting. I think there's a chance Kirk just retires because he's made enough money in the league, and he's got a good life in Minnesota and stuff. But I also think there's a very good chance he returns to Minnesota. I think that, look, like they don't really have, they're not going to be bad enough with the schedule they have coming up to pick in the top 10. And Kwesi Adofo-Mensah has shown a lack of willingness to draft a quarterback outside the top 10. Passed on Will Levis, passed on Malik Willis, passed on Kenny Pickett, and like for better or worse, I just don't think that they're going to see options that are maybe better than Kirk Cousins right now.
Well, isn't it all solved right now with the trade that they made? Going ahead and picking up Dobbs.
Very like I will say this. Good on Kwesi for not being like one of those leaders that he traded for a quarterback who's smarter than him. Good for him.
Any of the other trades? We've talked a lot about the Washington deals and what that means, but Dobbs from the Cardinals to the Vikes, Packers, Rasul Douglas going to the Bills, Peoples-Jones to the Lions, Ezra Cleveland to the Jags. Any of those jump at you, Jeff?
Leonard Williams to Seattle, I like a lot. I feel like they are trying to do some things to beef up their defense. They're smelling an opportunity here with the Niners being vulnerable and struggling. And, I don't think Frank Clark is going to be a huge pickup for them, but you watch them play defensively against Cleveland in that game. And granted, it was a backup quarterback, but Jamal Adams made some plays, some big plays. Jordan Brooks, who came back from that ACL, or linebacker, really played well in that contest. They've got a lot of invested in their secondary. There's some pieces there, some elements that you can see that they could really, the way the Niners are playing right now, they could give them a run for that division now.
Yeah. What do you make of the Leonard Williams deal, Eric?
I think it's steep from a picks perspective, but if you are Seahawks, how much longer is Geno Smith going to give you this level of play before the league kind of finds him out, before kind of, we expect the gravity of the situation? So I like them going in. Look, this NFC's terrible, right? The Vikings might make the playoffs in the NFC with Josh Dobbs, right? So why not? And I look, Boye Mafe has been wonderful for them rushing the passer. Williams, my whole thing going into the year was didn't know where they were going to get a pass rush. Now they can get it not only from their defensive line, but also Jamal Adams, Devon Witherspoon from the slot. Like, that's a good defense. And, in a month or so, they'll have their tackles back and they'll have DK Metcalf at full health. Like, that's a good NFC football team.
It's a 24-second and a 25-5th. That's the deal. Leonard Williams has been moved a lot. For a guy that's supposed to be really good, he never seems to have a home. And the Seahawks are giving up quite a bit, right? Like, why not just sit back and play out what you got and use those draft picks and draft guys? I mean, now it seems like they're in quite a hurry. This feels kind of like Pete Carroll going, I'm not going to be here forever, fellas.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly what he's doing.
Yeah, but why not? I mean, the balance of power, I mean, you're never going to get – like, look at the NFC quarterback. Murray and Cousins are hurt. Hurts is kind of down this year. He's leading the league in picks going into last week. Dak is Dak. Like, Geno is a top 5 quarterback in this conference. Like, it's time to go.
I think you should settle down about Geno being that good.
Petro, name 4 active quarterbacks in the NFC better than Geno.
I name 4
that are healthy ones.
Healthy ones. That's what I'm saying. Healthy.
Yeah.
Dak Prescott.
Dak, Jalen.
Is it me or is it you? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, no, you name them. Name them.
I'll take Jalen Hurts, Dak Prescott. I will take Goff. So we're saying that what's he in Minnesota's not active?
We can't walk.
I just want to make sure what we're talking about here. I might take
down.
I'll take Matt Stafford. I may take Baker Mayfield. But I don't think any of those. It doesn't matter. None of those. Like, after, who's going to play in the Super Bowl that's not named San Francisco, Detroit, or Philadelphia?
Thank you for Detroit, by the way.
Or possibly Dallas. Well, it'll be those 4. I'll give you the field. We've done this before, Jeff.
Okay.
And
you get. So give me Detroit. Give me Detroit and Seattle, and I'll bet you against the field.
Done.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm good with that. Yeah, that's just too much math against you. You're not. That's not mathematician.
I'm willing to take a stand on my Detroit Lions. The Lions, Jeff, have not played a home game in the wild card round of the NFC playoffs since 1993. They will not this year either. That is the 1 seed in the conference.
Wow, Eric's calling the 1 seed.
Have you seen their schedule?
Yeah, that's pretty good right now.
It's a walk of cake.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I get Seattle too.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Yeah. Okay.
You're giving me the chance to bet against playoff Dak, which is a lock. Purdy.
Eric's feeling
Hurts. And any other random upset that could occur.
But Hurts, yeah. I mean, but have you seen Hurts? Petro, you on your afternoon walk you have more mobility right now. Have you seen Hurts try to escape the pocket? He looks like all he's done in the last 6 months is squat 600 pounds.
Yeah.
He looks slow.
All right. What are you looking at this week, Jeff? What's week 9 hold for you?
Eagles, Cowboys. I mean, that to me, I mean, I think
Not Chiefs, Dolphins.
That's the better game, but I think the more telling game will be Eagles, Cowboys, just because, obviously the Cowboys coming in on a high note, the way they played last week, the Eagles finding themselves offensively. They're still trying to figure out their defensive secondary, but man, I think this is the first real matchup. I mean, I think if Dallas wins this game, I'll be really high on Dallas next week.
Okay. Eric, what are you looking at? By the way,
I mean, other than the privilege that Falcons Vikings, I'm excited for Jets Chargers. I think the Jets Chargers.
Yes.
I think the Jets Chargers is going to be the biggest priv of the whole, because that defense for the Jets is the truth. And so I think Herbert's going to go like 29 of 47 for 138 in that game. It's just going to be the most disgusting football game I've ever seen. I can't wait.
Are you on the Jets bandwagon now? Are you?
No, I'm not. I'm not. I don't know who's going to win that game. I frankly don't care. It's going to be a disgusting football game.
It could be 4 in a row.
Yeah.
JETS.
Zach Wilson, by the way, did you like? And I know the weather was bad, and I know that he had a good drive at the end of regulation. But my God, does he suck? Everybody was looking at Tommy DeVito and being like,
"What are you talking about?" Dan Orlovsky said he played a great game.
Right, we lost that guy a long time ago. He should have just kept running out the back of that end zone because we lost him. It was bad. Like I was watching.
By the way, can I just before we move off that, watching Dominique Foxworth and who was on the set with him? Dominique Foxworth and
was it Rex Ryan? I think it was Rex Ryan. I saw some of that.
And Foxworth going, if you had just had for him, right? If you just had for him, and then he wouldn't do it. He's like, what do you mean? It was a great, and they're just like, you could see Dominique Foxworth said, I'm not going to argue with you, Dan. I'm not like, it was an uncomfortable television. You've been there, Jeff.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if you saw that, but it was an uncomfortable television moment.
Yeah.
Rex Ryan and Dominique Foxworth, like, dude, just stop. Stop.
Yeah. What Dan, Dan's agent, somebody told him, your job is to be the most redonkulous person on this television show every single day. And he's like, done. Every single day, he answers the call. Zach Wilson was not a viable quarterback for 58 minutes the other day.
Right, he was bad.
He made like 3 decent throws. I mean, come on, give me a break. Look, I think I love my smorgasbord of bad games. Commanders, Pats. Oh, I mean, that's a treat right there. One team's doing what the other one should have been doing, and that's tank, right? I do like that. Giants, Raiders. Josh McDaniels, days. Ryan Table waving the white flag. But come on, Bills, Bengals. That's a good one. I mean,
that's a good one.
That's a really good one. I do like some of my dog games that are out there, and just to see how bad it can be for some of them. But it's actually a really good board for the NFL. Dolphins, Chiefs, in the early game. Vikings, Falcons, 2 teams that are fighting for a legit playoff spot in the NFC, even with them losing Kirk Cousins. Seahawks, Ravens. Is a good game. Even Bucks and Texans. Texans are kind of feisty, and the Bucks are still kind of in the mix. That's a pretty good game. Cowboys, Eagles, Bills, Bengals, Chargers, Jets. Pretty good board, particularly when you're in bye week time. I'm happy. And I'm happy that for me being a Chiefs fan, I'll watch my team, and then I can sit back and relax and and watch all the other games afterwards. That'll be nice. That'll be nice. A couple of Coronas in hand, picking up the rest of the action. Remember, we're always brought to you by our friends at Gann Asphalt and Concrete, the best. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews. They've been solving parking lot problems since 1994. Every project comes with a written warranty. Why would you go anywhere else? Let the experts at Gann Asphalt and Concrete let you focus on your business as they solve any and all parking lot problems. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, one contractor, all things parking lot. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com. So for Jeff Chadiha from the NFL Network, Eric Eager from Sumer Sports, my name is Soren Petro saying thank you very much for joining us here. And by the way, thank you very much to Doug Whaley. Great stuff with the former Bills GM. He was fantastic. If you caught us late, make sure you go back and listen to the podcast because great stuff with the former Bills GM, now current VP and Executive Director of Player Personnel for the XFL, Doug Whaley. So for Jeff, Eric, I'm Soren. Thanks for joining us here on the 2D